All right, so the agenda for today is NDIS Funding 101, and it is only a few slides. We're going to go through the basic building blocks of a plan and what is reasonable and necessary, and why we're going to have to now start referring to those terms a lot more than we used to. Then we'll do a home and living update. My whole work at the moment very much revolves around home and living. So I'm the principal consultant in the support side of home and living, and I work with a colleague very closely, Brent Wilgar, who does the housing side of support. We have a lot of insight and information that's come from providers like you across the country around what's happening in each of those areas and how that's starting to unfold in relation to the changes that we can see in the next year. So we're going to go through that a little bit. We're going to deeper dive into SIL because I know that's where a lot of you are working, and SIL has changed quite significantly. And then the last part is going to be delivering a sustainable service, and these are just going to be a selection of a case study and a selection of things that you can start to think about today in relation to the changes. And I know that I've already talked about Mari about coming back and helping to maybe facilitate some of those. So looking at what that might look like. So also, I guess if you have questions completely unrelated, I am time limited to 3 hours, so do feel free to ask them about specific scenarios, but if I need to get back to you later, I absolutely will make the time to do that. Right, so NDIS Funding 101. All we're really going to talk about an NDIS plan. Has anyone not been heavily involved in planning, seeing plans? Everyone's kind of up with that in this room? Yeah, to some level? Excellent. So we are just going to talk about the breakdown between core, capital and capacity building. I'm sure you're all aware that that exists. But one of the really big emphases I'm going to talk about today is capacity building, and really starting to understand about how this particular part of the plan can be used in SIL. And what we normally do is we think about SIL sitting over in core and capacity building being for specialists, and that's absolutely not the case. We've got a significant amount of funding reductions happening right now, and the NDIA is saying we will not increase SIL funding. Please stop asking us, please stop sending us your reviews. But what we do know is that they're willing to invest over here. Under an insurance model, capacity building is about making sure that people are getting more proactive, positive supports to be able to achieve their dreams. I don't mean miracles. Really, really important that when I say capacity building, you don't go, well, you don't know the people we work with. I'm sure I do, because I've probably worked with people really similar. And capacity building doesn't mean I'm going to get up and walk out of my wheelchair. It doesn't mean I'm going to go out and live on my own. It means I'm going to take my direct support I currently receive and reduce that a little bit over time. So that might be only going from a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1 to 3. That's capacity building, because we've started to understand why these interventions are necessary and then started to try and work to remove them using things like technology or proactive supports to be able to do that. And a lot of the support you would do in SIL over in the core section is more reactive. It's a more maintenance type approach. So we're going to really start to break down the plan and how to use it better, and also talk about the fact that support coordinator didn't turn up today, did she?
No.
All right, then she can just watch and get mad later. Support coordinators pretty much say, stay in your lane. That's you over there. Stop asking for more money. And reality is, plan reviews won't happen unless all of this has been used, and SIL needs to start being able to draw into this. But the other part of this is really starting to understand that our emotional attachment to SIL, supported independent living, also needs to go as well. So I'm hoping I'll convince you about that before the end of the day. So before I move off this, because it is really high level, is there anything you would like to talk about in relation to your understanding of the plan and the different parts within it?
No, but I can imagine that there'll be a level of fear about how much improvement they will expect from the capacity building, and how much control we have over that, as well as, am I right in hearing that it might be like 12-week cycles of programs or something, You might know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Yeah, and so you'll cover that. Yeah.
I do, we do cover programs of support, and no, it won't be linked to that. And the good news is, I don't think the agency's really going to care.
Okay.
So we're going to get to a place where there's going to be a lot less interaction with the agency in general. SIL specifically, home and living funding, shared support funding won't be reviewed as frequently. You'll get reviews that only touch on these parts. So we will see that funding stay very, very static, and they're using what's called a life stage approach. So it will be a person potentially has transitioned out of school, potentially looking for their first home and what that looks like away from mum and dad, and that will be one stage of their life. And it probably won't be until they then reach a different part of their work life or something else significant changes before we even look at their funding again. So it'll stay very, very static, and I hit some emotion. Fantastic.
No,
Okay.
You're probably covering this later on,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure. So I understand the focus on capacity building, and know there's the demo projects.
Yeah.
With the legacy clients, I'd say they're an older cohort.
Yeah.
So you've got health conditions deteriorating.
Yeah.
So there'd be a decent percentage where, irrespective of capacity building supports may increase.
Yes.
Is that covered later on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, beautiful.
And also, the fortunate thing about me working for DSC is that I do work with organisations across the country, and I'm currently working with one of the providers who does work with legacy people who's doing a demonstration project. So while I'm not going to give away their name or the specifics of that project, I do know it can work. There's some teasing problems, and that's why I'm working with them, but you can make shifts for those people. What I will teach you today is about when we do start to talk about people aging, we need to not say that at all. We need to talk about the functional impact of their disability while they age. So what happens is we normally talk about they're getting older, their support needs are increasing. Great, can you give aged care a call? Because that's not our remit. And that's generally what you would be hearing. But what we want to talk about is why it's more difficult for a person with a disability to age. And that's where the money comes in. So we don't want to flick them out of the NDIS. We want to make sure we keep them in. But the other thing that's really important to say today is this language, you shouldn't have known it. This is new. All of these changes that I'm going to talk about today have been evolving over the last 2 years, and I'll explain the progression. So whatever language you used a year ago was right and relevant for the time. So there is no judgment here. It's if we're going to move forward and you're going to be able to get real outcomes for people, you need to keep contemporary in the language, and the agency changed it overnight. And that's why your responses aren't getting the same as what you thought they would.
You're saying that under SIL can we actually access into capacity building. Now, from our experience too, my particular area, improved daily living is got a lot of people that are actually tapping into that funding.
Yep.
So you've got specialist behaviour support, you've got OTs, you've got physios, you've got speechies, and all of that. So I guess we sort of need to have that conversation around where other people are tapping into that money, and there's stuff in there. How is it that SIL is actually working collaboratively with that, so you do have the outcomes of the capacity building?
I'm so glad I built that into the presentation. Yes, so you do. And reality is, if we're asking for money in core, we're not also going to get it in capacity building. And then they're going to go, oh, too much money in SIL, let's drop that budget right down, which is what they did over the last year. And instead of having what we wanted left over here, we've just gone, oh, there's no money left, it's not enough. Because we're asking for it over there, and that's problematic. But I've got a whole heap of diagrams that breaks that down for you to be able to talk about what are those line items in capacity building that you could be tapping into, and when could you use them. And my very big disclaimer, I'm not saying let's see where we can grab more money from the plan. That is absolutely not what we're going to talk about today. It's how do we transfer what we've been doing from this really limited space over into more contemporary NDIS approaches. And also, we're going to talk about what Mari said. We do have legacy people that we're supporting that need the dignity of being able to function within the NDIS that was not built for them, it's built for the new. And how do we make sure that we're bringing their family along, and we're doing that this afternoon, and how do we make sure that that they have the ability to say, I actually like my group home and I plan on staying here, and you tell those people in the government that I have no interest in moving. To do that, to be able to recognise that choice and really achieve it for the person, you will need to learn how to apply new funding to their existing model. And if you try to apply the old funding to the existing model, it wouldn't be enough for them. So to be able to facilitate what they want, we need to absolutely be able to understand what we're talking about today.
How do we then, the one for me is the home modifications.
Yeah.
So where we have an OT make a recommendation on something which will make somebody independent in an area of their life, and then NDIS say yes, and when we go to SDA they say no.
Yes.
Because I'm talking about a bidet for somebody.
Yeah.
So they say no because 5 people use that toilet, who's going to maintain it, it's not just for the one person, all that sort of stuff. So how do we get the things that people need to keep them independent that are recommended?
Yeah.
Is there a guideline around what SDA cover under home modifications?
There is, and I think that, again, this is another language thing where if you say home modifications to an SDA provider, they're going to say you can't do them in SDA, because the minute you do a home modification, the registration for SDA is gone. You can do assistive technology, so you can get aftermarket bidets that can be, and I've not used it. I'm glad you're filming. That I have installed for a person that literally took a plumber to plumb it into the wall. It sat on top of the toilet. It could be removed when they left. Now, I know that, yes, there's shared toilets and things like that, but potentially it's about that person going, okay, well, my independence is really important to me. I could be much more independent with an aftermarket bidet that can be retrofitted to my toilet, which means I don't need to worry about home modifications. I don't need to worry about that. Maybe this home isn't good for me because I need my own toilet to fit it on. And that's where we're going to start to go, it'd be great if I could live in the same place forever, but sometimes movements between homes are really good for life transition. And maybe it's just about doing that, but also really saying, okay, this is the current model of what we think could happen for this person, but if we were actually able to just pivot a bit and get that aftermarket product. I'm also going to tell you that you want to avoid home modifications all you can, and low-level assistive technology is going to be your best bet, and even the mid-level now, you don't really need quotes or any, the bucket of money for that has increased substantially. And Brent, who I've spoken about and I work with quite a lot, he's got a social enterprise with his son who has cerebral palsy, and they had an assistive technology review for home mods for their house, and it was basically, you're just going to have to move, your house isn't going to work for this. And he said, we're not moving, but he did all they were going to do and more with $5,000 at Bunnings and Officeworks. So, you know, we think we're going to have to build all of this technology into the building. We're not. We're going to actually be able to just grab stuff off the shelves and make real differences for people without having to really worry about that. So part of that is
probably worth knowing, say 90% of our houses are with Homes Victoria, which is DFFH.
Yes.
So they're new to this, so they're
Yes.
coming on the journey as well. And there's quite a thick collaboration agreement, so there's still that government mentality as opposed to a partnership collaboration.
Yeah, and look, you're going to have that type of setup, you're going to have SDA providers, and you can go, look, we can fight over modifying this building, or we can just go up to whatever shop you buy bidets and put that in ourselves and just ask for a little bit of plumbing that we can revert back. I will say, see, I go off on tangents. If you do go into home modifications and stuff and you're asking for that, don't forget, I learnt this from Brent, don't forget to ask for reversals when the person leaves. A lot of tenancy agreements talk about having to reverse it. You can build that into the funding as well. So you don't want to have that person left with a bill at the end of reverting the building back. If you've got it built in, they may be more likely to say yes as well. So these are the common capacity building budgets that you would already know. OT, physio, speech, they're the people that are currently tapping into these type of fundings. And the NDIS name of the areas are really important as well, because later I'm going to give you the line items that can be done by specific, by support workers, no extra qualifications, and how they will tie into these different areas. The other thing that we're going to talk about in 101 is reasonable and necessary. Now, because of the legacy transition, a lot of the time what they did is they took a home and they transferred it across. Yes, the individuals got their own plan, but it was basically just as being part of the system before, you were entitled to everything now. And for ease of transition, SIL providers created a roster of care, they sent it off. As long as it looked reasonable, you got your money. And we all celebrated because the money went up quite substantially and we started to dream a lot bigger. Now, what's happening now, a lot of the changes will mean that if you ask for a review, you will trigger a reassessment of the person's eligibility. That person may go from SIL to flexible core. Doesn't mean they need to move out. It just means that you will now have a person who is funded at their actual NDIS level, not their legacy NDIS level. So what we now need to do is really change the evidence we're submitting, because the legacy information won't work anymore, and start to go, is what I'm asking for ticking all of these boxes? Because if it's not, then the new computer, and they're building a new portal, so the funding and the plan building will all happen in the same space, and the new computer will say no. So we can't just say, I've had it before anymore, because they will be reassessed.
That's interesting, Rebecca, because when we transitioned, we had lots of disagreements with the NDIA, and they didn't approve the funding we asked for in numerous cases. And we can see now the funding for the legacy is generally lower than participants across other directorate states. Even though the needs may be the same or higher.
Yeah, okay. And possibly just around things like this, around the language we're using, do you think? Let me know at the end whether you think if we were to change our language, whether that would tap into more funding.
I think so, because I think that the services David's talking about transitioned later than all of the services that you'd be talking about, and around the same time that these changes started happening as well. So I think in a lot of cases,
that'd make sense.
Politically, we transitioned first time.
Yes.
These quotes were kind of the first ones taken through that different assessment.
Yeah, so you're asking contemporaries what happened for you, and you're getting a very different outcome, but you're in a very different time period than when they were. Okay, that makes sense. Well, sorry that you didn't have the last 6 years as a really big buffer to be able to put that away. But I guess the good thing is that you're not having as big a culture shock right now from those people who had set up all new arms of their business and new management structures and stuff to be able to facilitate what they thought was long-term funding, and it very much wasn't.
So, Rebecca, though, if we triggered a reassessment of eligibility by requesting a review, might that not work to our advantage given the very low funding packages some of the people we support with very complex needs have? And would I not maybe end up with a better funding package with flexible core?
I'd love to say yes.
But you don't
We've had a few examples. We've had an increase.
You will have some.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely the exception.
But overall, you're not thinking that would be a...
I've added that into the presentation. I'll give you my thoughts around it, but you will have circumstances where, yes, do not go in unless you're prepared with what we're going to talk about today, because you absolutely 100% will not. With all of the stuff we're going to talk about today, possibly. Because I think you'll go in asking for more SIL funding, and RIA or whatever.
And be reassessed and end up with flexible core, and you need to be sure you've got all the evidence for that to be...
But also flexible core has caps.
Okay, right.
So, you know, and we'll talk about the caps in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
So things like the active nights, etc. which you can
Oh,
risk
we're
losing
getting
for
there.
some, and then
I always feel really reassured. I get all nervous going, what if I don't know anything? And then all the questions are pretty universal. I'm like, oh good, it's all in there, we'll be fine. I promise we're getting there.
I'll ask one more thing. I know
Please.
we're blocking you off here, but when we trigger that reassessment, which might mean we go from SIL to flexible core, is there then a relationship with SDA eligibility as well?
Loosely, but the way they're going to change the way plans are built, it won't matter what you're in or where you go. You'll have a set amount of funding and you can call it whatever you want. And that's in about a year. So, well, we're going to have the policy come out and change it, but we're already seeing it across the board in different places. There's like this weird rollout happening unofficially while we wait, but there will be a new portal and a new, if we go back, new support category that will be shared support in the home, SIL, ILO, flexible core, all in one bucket. Whatever code you use to get it out of the ATM, your problem, but you'll still have a limit to how much that will be.
So I mean, tomorrow, so before that change happens, if someone was moved from SIL to flexible core, would they likely still have SDA eligibility, or would they not have SDA?
I don't think they're going to take away eligibility for SDA if a person already has it. If you've convinced that that's happening, your problem may be legacy people, but if they've got it, they won't take it away.
Okay.
Will they change the levels? Maybe. I'd have to kind of ask Brent what's happening across the board in that. But I think your problem will be new people coming in trying to get SDA. Yeah. You may impact on them rather than the people that already have basic or whatever you're able to get for them. Yes, thank you for that. All right, so to be able to get something in an NDIS plan, it needs to get all 6 of these as a yes. And I'm going to go through an example in a minute. So the support will assist the participant to pursue the goals, objectives, aspiration, including in the participant's statement of goals and aspirations. I don't know how many providers I saw when I started reviewing plans and SIL things that said, this person wants to stay in their home supported by us for the rest of our lives. Done. It's like, I don't know that that's legit. And that meant that they weren't going to get moved out of SIL and they were going to get funded that come into our bank account. I think every single person in SIL had that goal. So the goals need to be cleverly designed to be able to tap into that capacity building funding. You want to make sure that if that's a maintenance goal, so why would I give you money? It's not capacity building. If in an insurance-based model I invest for an outcome, you're asking me to continue doing something. So really clear that if we want to be able to access some of that extra capacity building funding, that we're really looking at goals that will eventually lead to a reduction of person-to-person support. I don't mean getting rid of it, but just, instead of being directly beside you, maybe I'm just a little bit further away. And that's the difference between a 1-to-1 and a 1-to-2 ratio. So really starting to understand what intervention looks like. The support will assist the participant to undertake activities so as to facilitate the participant's social and economic participation. I'm going to get back to that in some of the language I'm going to use in a minute. The support represents value for money in the costs of support are reasonable relative to both the benefits achieved and the cost of alternative support. I'm so glad it was you that said it. There is not a provider across the country that says to me, we've got the easy people. Every single provider has the complex ones, and I haven't seen the complex that they have had. So I knew I could say that to you. Going to the agency and saying that, they're going to go, oh, I'm sure you do. But you're also going to really need to start to understand what is value for money in relation to a government funding, and what in relation to risk, and especially operationally, there is no reduction that can happen here for this person. I'm letting you know this is how it has to be. Well, yeah, under the model and the thinking we currently have, that is true, but we may need to go and shake up our quality people's door and go, your policy's crap and it doesn't work under the NDIS, and we may need to go back and say, what don't I know about contemporary practice and technology and things that can actually come in here and fix this, and what is this ILO thing and can I use it? And what we will see is not clear SIL, ILO or flexible core. We'll see a combination of all of those supports for one person based on what can work for them. But we will talk about that later.
So, sorry, again, though, is there not the ability, I get value for money, but often we want a piece of equipment for somebody that's going to reduce risk in an
Yeah.
LH&S sense, which NDIA say no, there's a cheaper version. Is there not some ability for the person to make up the difference and get the better piece of equipment?
If you've got people that have money, it's the same as, you know, getting any type of money from anywhere. I can then choose to supplement that money. I think it really important to understand we can't charge, we can't cover the costs of, we can't, those type of languages that are used in businesses, commercial, we need to get that away. People can buy whatever they want. So if mum and dad are loaded, take what the NDIA gives you and then add on a bit more. No problem at all. I think we see things like caps, like around rent caps, board caps. They are the maximum you can charge a person. They're not the maximum a person can contribute. It becomes problematic when we say they wanted to contribute, and we know they didn't. We were covering our costs. So that's why if it's applied universally, it's a cost covering exercise. If it's bespoke for a person that says, I'm a wicked gamer and I want to stay up all night and I want the top internet speeds and I want you to be able to, I don't know, put whatever gamers have in wherever, and you're like, that's not reasonable under your board contribution, no, it's fine. I'll contribute some more because literally all of my social comes from gaming and that's how I remain connected to community. So I will take this portion of my own money and invest it into there. Not a problem at all. So you can do those type of things. The support will be or is likely to be effective and beneficial for the participant. So we are going to talk a little bit today about funding locations and funding provider determined support models. You need to really be able to show that it's beneficial for that person and it actually will get outcomes. And because of our previous funding model, we're not talking in that way right now. We're still talking in sustainability and talking about funding locations. So we're going to cover that off a little bit. The funding or provision of the support takes account of what is reasonable to expect families, carers, informal networks in the community to provide. And that needs to be a new definition as well. So what I don't mean is making mum and dad come back in and be unpaid support workers. That is not the case at all. But we can no longer relinquish into care. We now have to remain involved in people's lives. Now, there are some people that don't have family and that will be much harder for them. But as a provider who can no longer interact with the agency to get money, you're going to need to have families who learn at least the bare minimum to be able to get that money in the plan. And to do that, they need to understand what your needs are as well as the person's needs and be able to facilitate that. Because they can get some really good outcomes, come to you and you go, oh no, that doesn't work for us. The big difference, I think, is that we were working under a state government-based determined model of disability support. So it was their job to convince people that that was worthwhile, or governments wouldn't exist, because it's like, well, this is what this welfare model is the way to go. Clearly we disagreed because we have the NDIS. We said, your model sucks and we don't want to do it anymore. So we have the NDIS. Now under that, we're not in a welfare system anymore, we're in a more commercial world. So Apple doesn't go, hey, tech people, can you tell them why they should buy my computer? They understand that to sell, they need to invest. They need to understand and they need to be able to help the people that buy from them understand what the benefits and if I didn't have tech support from Apple, if I didn't have all of those type of things, I wouldn't be well, I still would, I really like Apple. But I'd probably go, I don't know, this is value for money. So we need to take the stuff that's not your job to fund out and then give you more overheads to be able to fund this education piece, because that's what's really important, and that's thank you. And that's how we, I told you I was a talker, thank you so much. So really important that we do that. We don't say, when are you going to come in and tell this family why I do what I do? That's not their job, it never was.
Yeah, no, I guess my question was more about how much the NDIA communicate their shifting goalposts to families as opposed to how much we need to interpret
or
that
to you.
Yeah.
Not just families, for sure. I mean, I have mapped out from the last 2 years, I have really been wrong on the stuff that's happened. And it was all there. All the signs were there. Why didn't they just tell us? Why didn't they give us the roadmap? Because we're putting together all these dots and then people go, oh, that makes so much sense. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why aren't they telling us? I don't know.
Just prepare you for the afternoon session. So this is happening with the NDIA. It's not what families signed up for. It's not what they promised. So, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
The slides are different for them. Oh, did I? Please.
Probably an organisational perspective, because language is so important and the changing of the goalposts is so important. And I think from an organisational perspective, that those goalposts can change quite quickly.
Yeah.
And then the communication's often thick down.
Sure.
And we see organisations now really putting people in place to track that.
Yep.
We see that happening in mental health.
Yep.
They're pretty much ahead on that.
Yep.
And that's perhaps what our space needs to look at as well, because you might get that information quicker than us. And that because that can be a big difference in terms of funding.
100%.
And so we might have to improve.
Well, I think that's why I'm in the building. But I also want you to know, your execs, your CEO, whoever they don't know any of this, because there is no briefing that goes to anyone. This is the only reason why you get such a cohesive representation, because I'm a big Uber geek and I literally spend all my time piecing things together, and I have the ability to do that. We then go out to the sector and we go, what's happening for you? And then we filter in experiences and go, yeah, we're right. Or no, that isn't what's happening, and then we'll talk about that. So I think that the stewardship from the NDIA on the change has been really, really bad. I think that's because the people in power do not understand the intricacies of group home support and what it took to make it up, possibly because there was different state governments with their hands in that, and how do you bring all these differences universal? But they could have done this a lot better. And I do think that there are ways that I'm going to give you a whole heap of resources where the information I have has come from and map through why I think it's going the way it's going to go. But also, I do think it is time, and Black Without Barriers has done this, that said, okay, we need to start to get more proactive rather than wait for the government to do the right thing, because they're never going to do it. So I'm really heartened by the fact they're doing that. I had another hand.
Sorry, mine was in regards to assistant coordinators. So we work with some collaborative, and I'm just wondering is there much support and training for them to understand this?
Yeah.
Is there a big connector with the families as well, and they kind of don't work with us, they work against us?
Of course, yeah. And look, reality is, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, the SIL funding, the support in the home funding, was never part of the support coordinator's remit. They dealt with this part of the plan, and providers would deal directly with the agency for the other part. So they used to go, you got it sorted? Did you submit your roster of care? Great, leave you to it. It's been in the last 12 months that all of a sudden that's not happening anymore, and they have been dumped into having to understand this. So we do 2-day intensive support coordinator training, and as far as I know, every support coordinator goes to it because they're just consistently selling out and running. But what I have found is our specific SIL models that have been designed for providers have got equal attendance from support coordinators and providers in the last 12 months. So I do think support coordinators are starting to understand, and allied health actually, are starting to understand that they need to now learn this and also understand that some of the negativity that's come out of the documents recently and the negativity towards group home providers needs to go because they're actually stopping the outcomes from being achieved. So we're at the start of that, unfortunately. But I do think us being able to go back to the space we're in with the department, where we're able to spoon feed them exactly what we need, but in a way that doesn't sound like we're grabbing for money, will become more important. Okay, so the support is more appropriately funded or provided through the NDIS and not through other general systems. I will say up until recently, the NDIA has not been rigid about this. They have been funding more than they should for people that it wasn't their remit to fund. Really, really good example is the crossover between Justice and NDIS. So you had a whole heap of people on supervision orders that got one-on-one SIL just because they needed to have one-on-one support. Now the agency has come back and said that is not disability related, that is justice related. So you will have found over the last 6 months, all of a sudden those people have gone from 1-to-1 down to 1-to-3. And when we use things like prevent the risk of reoffending, great, talk to Justice. We're not talking about disability supports related to a disability need. So again, that's just another reason why, while they make these shifts that should have been done all at once to make it easier for us, we're now having to change the language around that as well. And I'll show you where I got that information before I confirmed with the providers why those type of things are happening.
And are those other people actually coming to the party?
No.
Right.
Is the government doing what they need to?
Yeah, like, because that was the way it was designed from the beginning.
Of course.
Then it didn't get implemented to that extent. We've ended up picking up the slack and doing the same as we've always done. And I hadn't seen personally evidence that either health or justice or education were actually taking the lead. So we're in. So do I take from what you're saying then is that we're in the period where some pressure is coming to bear on them to do that, but they're not yet at the table?
Yes.
Okay.
But in the interim, we need to figure out whether what we're asking for is legitimately disability.
Actually, we need to be very clear about that.
Yes.
So we're ready to say that bit actually has to be done then. Because in the meantime, because of risk, we're still carrying the can.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So with STOs then, of the client that's got 2-to-1 funding, should we start sort of preparing and expecting that funding will be reduced from 2-to-1 to 1-to-3? And are they going to then argue that Justice should be funding that additional staffing, or what can we do to prepare for that?
So I would read the Would We Fund It pages. Have you seen them? All right, we'll get to them in a minute. They've put out some new Would We Fund It pages that really starts to say, literally this was an example. Would we fund this? No, it's a Justice thing. I would prepare yourself for that, absolutely. 1-to-3 is their favourite ratio. I don't understand why, but everyone is getting it. You'll have all of this individualised support and all of this 1-to-3. I don't know whether they think we've got all of these 4-bedroom homes everywhere, but I think it's just a shift from 5-to-3. I would prepare. I don't know that you should expect Justice to come to the party, but I would start those conversations and say, look, the agency, this is what's coming. What is our plan here? And alternatively, what does supervision look like? I think we have a very rigid view because we've been funded 1-to-1 up until now around what supervision could look like. So really, and kind of prepare yourself for what is the risk here for Life Without Barriers, because there will be one. And then at board or executive level, what is our appetite for risk? What can we do? What can't we do? And how soon do we need to communicate that to people that this is going to be a problem? And do not take on the whole responsibility yourself. There are support coordinators for a reason. Their job is literally to manage these risks. While we don't have clear boundaries of our service, and while we still operate in that legacy model that is, it's our problem, they're going to let us do it. So these are a few changes that we need to make to at least prepare. It'll still be a shock. I can't say that.
It's easy to say that because we already have tension with health because of the problems with beds and pushing and releasing people early.
Yep.
From the Quality Safeguarding Commission, it's viewed as our responsibility. Same with community visitors as opposed to support coordinators. So there's a bit of conflicting views, I'd say, across the sector.
And I want to teach you yes if. Not yes or no. Yes, if it comes with this level of support, which is reasonable under the NDIS, and this technology, and this equipment, and this specialist, yes, we can. And that is your blocker to discharge. Not a no, yes, if. and get more on this capacity building side of things, away from, yes, if we get an astronomical SIL budget to cover off the unknowns, to yes, if we get an assistance animal that can predict this person is escalating or whatever it is, that will then mean we don't have to have a support worker with their eyes on them all the time, that will flag, or an Apple Watch that now measures your heart rate and all of those type of things that can then trigger. All of those things are the least intrusive models. Support workers still there, but they're not one-to-one going, hey, did you do anything lately that I didn't want you to do? But we're still, giving that person the support. That will reduce your person-to-person ratio support costs. So definitely get into that yes, if.
So is the NDIA going to act more quickly to give us the money to put that stuff in place? I've got the person sitting in hospital who can't come home without equipment. Hospital saying medically they're ready to be discharged, but we can't have them without the equipment.
No.
And NDIA saying 3 months to a review.
Yes.
How?
The news is not good. Person will have a predetermined amount of funding that you will need to work within, so reviews won't be necessary. You might get reviews for equipment and things like that. I'm going to encourage you to not think the only way to get access to that equipment is buying it. The health system can loan it, people can hire it, and all of those things fit within the low-level core
I'm talking
budget.
about major, like
Of course.
overhead hoists and...
Of course. Yeah, you can get a ceiling hoist that is able to be retrofitted, it comes with its own beams.
Yeah.
So you can say, okay, where can we hire this in the short term while we wait for, and can that be funded through the NDIS plan? And if not, well then I'm sorry, we have a barrier here for this person coming home. So there still needs to be people coming to that party with you. So a yes if encourages them to do that, and no says, well, you're blocking us and it's an attitudinal problem, and a yes says, we'll take on the problem and we'll solve it ourselves, which we don't want to do either.
So it's about us getting the knowledge about what else is out there
Correct.
for us to be able to use it.
Correct. Yes.
We'll have to be a lot more savvy with how we speak to health, the hospital, and the family in negotiating the return and how it's done.
Yeah.
That's what I can see. Yeah.
Are we facing a trickiness around health conditions that are connected to the disability but are technically health conditions?
I'm going to leave you with these. I'm answering your question. I'm going to leave you with these to read later because we're 3 slides in and at our first break.
Yeah.
It's fine. And I'm going to go to this. I'm going to answer your question with this.
Yeah.
So I did it through mental health because I've got an awesome person I work with that works across psychosocial, but it's still health. So we talk in mental health. We don't talk in psychosocial disability. We say a person has a mental health condition and they have hallucinations. Therefore, you should fund them. Nope, that's a health problem. We need to narrow that down to the psychosocial disability. What is the disability arising from the mental health problem? And talk to that. So really, really important that we now start to change our language. And I am having this conversation with the leading mental health providers across the country and going, stop telling me hallucinations equals one-to-one funding, because it does not. It is a symptom of a mental health problem. So what we want to be able to do is describe the symptom of the health or mental health or what it is problem, give an example of the functional impact, and then detail what supports are needed for the disability arising from that. So an example of this would be self-care. Kylie experiences hallucinations when using the bathroom, having a shower and performing daily personal routines such as brushing her teeth and hair. Right now, we then skip down here. She will require Kylie requires assistance from a support worker for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. Why? Doesn't make sense. We need to put this in, and not just we. Every allied health professional now needs to stop jumping from problem to ratio. We need to say the impact of Kylie's hallucinations means she is unable to perform her daily living tasks. When having a shower, her hallucinations prevent her from turning off or exiting the shower. They also tell her not to brush her teeth or hair. So that is her disability and the functional impact on it that has arisen from it. That's why a support worker is needed. Now, also we say, and she needs psychology because she's got psychosis or something. No, that's a health problem. No, she requires weekly sessions to develop strategies to manage the impact. Very different. Not to talk about my hallucinations, that's counselling. To create strategies to manage the impact that can be used with my support providers, absolutely. Now you've got psychology and support work in a person's plan. These are the preparations you need to make to be able to facilitate the conversations now, whereas now, 6 months ago, a year ago, you could go from here to here and the agency would go, yeah, okay, legacy person, I'm going to give it to you.
How many specialists will be across this chain? 0. None.
I did that off camera. We are training them. So this has come from my colleague Kylie Morgan, who leads our allied health laser coaching. And this is what she is training them. Now, a lot of the time, the reports you'll see coming out of them go functional capacity assessment, table of ratios, missing this completely. The other part that needs to happen is also another level of this. The reason we need a support worker 4 hours a day, not technology or equipment, is because we've trialled those things with this person or we've eliminated them because. And that means that you're more likely to get the direct support rather than the equipment or the technology that they're going to refer you to use. We can't use an assistance animal because the person's allergic to dogs, whatever that is. So describe the functional impact, talk about the supports arising from the disability, eliminate other options. We're at support. We know that this isn't ideal, but here's our capacity building plan to reduce that support over time. So that's the kind of the progression we need to go on to be able to talk to the agency in an assurance-based model. And if we do that, we'll be able to get funding in the plan, but more likely in the capacity building approach, which will be short-term funding for that problem to be able to work on it. Don't mean creating miracles. Kylie will always have hallucinations, unless there's a way to solve that. But maybe we can get her from 4 to 2. Not less because of the award, but maybe to 2. We wouldn't want to go lower than 2. But that's what we're talking about. She actually now can remember to do this because we found an iPad that reminds her something or some sort of technology, and now we're down to 2 hours. And come on, that's why we're here. I mean, we're not here to wrap ourselves around people, but we also need
I'm glad you said that because we actually want the technology solution if that's the right solution for
Yes.
the person.
Yeah.
It's just we don't want to be forced into that when we know they're either not there yet
Yes.
or that isn't the right solution.
Yes, yeah. But by changing our language, by changing the way we look at people, we can get there, and it's bloody exciting. This is why I think this is really important to learn, because I'm not going to come in and say, you're losing all your money, suck it. It's shift what you're doing. If you were to prepare all your reviews in this way, maybe you'll have success. With your current language, probably not. Yeah.
And so these are the kind of things that you said you sort of sense checked across the industry, and you're seeing more success with this type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes sense.
So that was NDIS 101.